Welcome. You are listening to the Be a Better Being podcast, hosted by Michelle Zellner and Sasha Berscheid. Michelle and Sasha are here to give you information and inspiration to help you live your healthiest, happiest lives. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoy the show.
Greetings. Thank you for tuning in to the Be a Better Being podcast. I'm Michelle Zellner, your host, and today I am joined by Cassie Briggs, who is a professional career coach. Now, I know some of you are like, oh, I don't need career coaching, so I'm just going to stop listening. Please don't, because I promise you, this conversation is going to have so much more than just talking about your professional journey, because Cassie brings to the table a lot of experience and really the story of why she even chose to become a career coach in the first place. So Cassie, welcome. Thank you for coming on the show.
Such a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Michelle.
Well, it is a pleasure to have you. So you and I got connected through my sister, which I love these, degrees of separation and how we find that we really have a lot in common, even though maybe on the surface it doesn't look like it. And yet when you're coaching anyone, right, the template is always very, very similar. But before we get into that, give us a little bit about your background, and then we're going to dive into just the journey of what has led you to become a professional career coach.
Sure, absolutely. So originally, I was the weirdo who in ninth grade decided I want to be a college biology professor. And I had tunnel vision from that point forward. And I did it. I got my master's degree, got my PhD, and then got my dream job straight out of my PhD. And about 5 years into that position, I had, and we'll talk more about this, I had a conflict between my personal and professional goals and had to navigate that. And ultimately, as you mentioned, it led to my transition into being a career coach. And I launched my own business, Success in Science Career Coaching, through that. And personally, I'm married. My husband, Andrew, and I live in downstate Michigan, and we have 2 young boys and are often found outside camping and fishing.
Well, that sounds like a delightful life that you've created. Let's talk a little bit about being a biology professor, things that you maybe experienced with students, and then ultimately, what that conflict is that you had that led you to make some decisions that you made.
Sure. So when I entered into my first position, I had everything in my life that just affirmed it. I had graduate teaching experiences where I'm like, yes, this is the perfect position for me and the perfect career for me. And I really loved that one-on-one bond with students. And then I taught my first class as a professor, and it was to 120 students, which is not quite an alignment with my teaching style or how I connect with students. And thank goodness for labs and office hours, because I got a little taste of that. Pretty soon after that, my university switched to 48 student caps for all their classes. And that was much more in alignment with my teaching style. And again, I loved everything about being in the classroom and interacting with students. The part that caught me by surprise was how much time and effort I was putting into preparing lesson plans and doing my research in addition to that. And it became pretty overwhelming in terms of, I guess my husband would be the first to attest to the fact that I was always working. I brought work home with me. I would work into the wee hours of the night. It started to impact my workout routine. And I should have mentioned this earlier, but I was a college athlete in volleyball and basketball. So being fit was a huge part of my life. And that was starting to be replaced by all of this work I was doing to prepare for my lessons. So in 2020, amongst this giant pandemic that hit our world, I was pregnant with our first kiddo. And that was when I started to realize some of my personal goals were now conflicting with my professional goals. I didn't have a family to think about before, but now I did. And I was commuting about an hour and 15 minutes one way to campus every day. And with a kiddo, I didn't imagine that being feasible. I mean, what are you going to do? Call the daycare and say, sorry, it'll be another hour and a half till I can pick up my kid, my sick kid. And so my husband and I had a long, hard talk about what we would do. And we started our positions at the same time. So he was a fish biologist with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and then switched to the DNR, Department of Natural Resources. And at that point, we both loved our jobs, but he got paid significantly more than me. Despite I had the PhD, he had the master's. And so that's just a testament to our society still not having a balance between salaries between men and women. We ultimately decided to move closer to his job. And unfortunately, if I could turn my computer around and describe to your listeners where I live, I'm surrounded by farmland and the nearest university is over an hour. So just being a university professor wasn't looking feasible for our new life. And so I started thinking about more deeply, what is it about teaching that I love? And it wasn't the meetings. It wasn't all the pressure to design the lesson plans. It was actually those one-on-one interactions with students. It was the office hours that turned from biology to career exploration. And that's when I discovered career coaching, and that launched me into this path.
I love that story. So I want to hop back just a little bit. Obviously, you're very driven, having this life mapped out for yourself in ninth grade and being an athlete, I'm guessing well before college, obviously. And so you had this ability to balance your life. I mean, there's a lot that goes into being a student athlete. Clearly, you were very devoted to your academics as well. And yet, when you get into your profession, the ability to manage all of it is no longer something that it seemed like you were able to do. So is it that there are maybe not clearly defined expectations when somebody enters a career that they have an idea of what it will be and it's not? Or is it that, hey, this is what I wanted to do. I know I'll be able to do it because I'm Cassie. I've always been able to do it. Why wouldn't I be able to do it? What do you think was really, the aha moment for you that made you kind of come to that conclusion?
Well, if you want the honest truth,
Yes,
I
please.
never had a handle on it. It was, all through high school, all through college, the only reason I stopped studying, I stopped working, was to go to basketball practice or because I had a game or a team event. So athletics for me was energizing and refueling, but also created a barrier so I didn't let myself go down the workaholic route. So then when that structure and that team responsibility dissipated afterwards, and by the way, in grad school, I joined the club volleyball team and the club basketball team. So I kept that structure going throughout my grad career. And it was only when that was gone, I can't go join the club team at my university. I'm a professor. That would be a little odd. It was gone. And so that structure was gone and that accountability was gone. And I did exactly what I feared I would. And I used that time to just work more. And as you can imagine, that led to a lot more stress and a lot closer to hitting the burnout point.
Absolutely. And this is why we are having this conversation during National Stress Awareness Month, because your story is not unique. Your story is the story I've heard hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. You seem to have figured it out very, very early in your life. I'm guessing this is maybe late 20s to early 30s when you're understanding this.
Yeah. So I'm in my mid 30s now, and it was probably maybe about 3 years ago, pretty much of the transition from being a professor to being an entrepreneur. And it's interesting because when you launch your own business, you hear those stories about people working 60 to 80 hours a week to get their business off the ground. At that point, I said, I'm going to do this differently from the start. And I set those boundaries from the start. But a key thing happened as I was making that transition. And I dug deep to figure out, why am I working so hard? Where is this workaholic tendencies coming from? And yeah, perfectionism was a piece of it, but bigger than that, I would feel guilty. I would feel guilty if I wasn't working. Like, what am I doing? Just sitting here watching a Netflix movie or going on a walk with my dog when I could be being productive. And as a scientist, I actually dug into the literature because I wanted to make an evidence-based decision, because I knew that would give me more confidence to make the shift. And sure enough, there are studies out there that show the more you work, the less sleep you get, the less exercise you get, the worse you eat. The quality of your work goes down, and the length of time it takes to do that worse quality work goes up. So I was actually spending more time on something that would take me a fraction of that if I was devoting more time to sleep and exercise. And so again, the scientist in me, I tested this out. So I started tracking my time and what I was doing, and then tracking how long it was taking me. And I saw that exact same pattern. If I sacrificed exercise, it took me 3 hours to do something that would have taken me 1. And so that evidence was enough to keep me on this track, and I no longer felt guilty. I knew my brain needed this to re-energize and to work at its optimal potential. And so sleep and exercise and eating well became kind of a mandatory part of my workday.
And that is why I knew you would be a perfect guest for this conversation, and why I love having scientists in my life who will validate and give credibility to the things that I tell people all the time. I haven't done the scientific research. I just understand how a human being functions and what a human being was designed to do. And it wasn't designed to work, and neglect itself and still put out a high quality product. Those two things don't go together. And so when you said earlier that your personal goals were not aligned with your professional goals, I'm guessing that some of those personal goals revolved around your own well-being and being that healthy, happy, highly productive, high functioning human. And I love that, your scientific brain did all of that research to really help you embrace that idea and own it and then live it. Were there still times when you'd still feel guilty for sleeping or going for that walk or prioritizing yourself over work?
I thought there might be, but no. But I will say that some different feelings replaced it. So instead of feeling guilty for not doing my self-care, and it's a little shameful to admit this, but I want to share this because there's got to be someone in your audience that can relate. I have been so career driven my whole life. When I had my kids, that was a huge shift. And there were points when, they don't follow a schedule to a T. I mean, my kids at this point are almost 3 and almost 1. So really young, really demanding of my time, and unpredictable in terms of their schedule and moods. So I felt that I was starting to resent them for interfering with me having my productivity time. And so I would go at the end of the week and feel like, I didn't accomplish much professionally. And I just looked at it as, this is a wash of a week, instead of thinking, at this season of my life, it is about my kids. My career is part of this, but this is my chance to really bond and be with the kids. Eventually, they will be school age and going to school, and I'll have my days back. But I hated the way I was feeling about it. And so I don't know if you're familiar with the tiny habits method, but I started implementing that approach in my life, and it changed everything. And now I feel like I have a true appreciation and balance between parenthood and my career.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And there's nothing shameful about it. I guarantee you're not the only person who feels that way. I guarantee it. And I think it's very natural to feel that way, right? I mean, there's these things that are disrupting what we want to do, even though these things are people that we want in our lives. So that is a totally normal feeling. So for anyone else who maybe is feeling that way, explain how that mindset shift kind of evolved and then did lead you to that ultimate conclusion of, this is the season right now and another season will come later.
Yeah, I think it was talking with some other parents, some other moms and dads who are balancing the work life and just kind of hearing their perspectives, but then also thinking about what's true in my situation, what can I do in my life in terms of just mindset, but also creating a structure in my life that could help mitigate that. So for example, I let go of the fact that I had to work 5 days a week. Frankly, that's kind of an American idea in the first place. There's a lot of countries that are shifting to the 4-day work week. And so I'm like, hey, there's some value there. Again, some literature showing that that's an effective way to go. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to work Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday. And mostly because Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I can get some childcare, but I can't afford childcare full time. So that seemed like a compromise financially. And then Saturday, my husband's home, so he can watch the kids. And so Tuesday and Thursday, I really focused on my primary role today is to be a great mom. And if I get a little work done during their nap time, that's just a bonus. But I am holding no accountability for myself to get something done today. And it took so much pressure off me. And it's really made me enjoy those parenting moments. And then the days when they are in childcare, really focus on my job and my business. And so it's led to frankly, a happier mom, probably a happier wife as well, but a happier career woman too. And in terms of changing the mindset, that is really tricky. But just a small side story here. I realized the power of the mind when I was preparing for the births of my 2 kids. And I went through this course called Hypno Babies. And the scientist in me was like, you can't hypnotize me. This is crazy talk. But really, it's about changing your mindset around it. And it worked. I couldn't believe it. I had 2 truly pain-free births. And my kids were like 10-pound babies. So that says something. And
you are not a large person.
No, definitely not. And so I think that experience taught me, you know what? The mind is incredibly powerful. I need to use it and leverage that. And so that's when I implemented this tiny habits method. So the whole idea of this method is that you make something so small, it's almost impossible to fail, and you celebrate, because those endorphins and the dopamine will keep your body wanting to do more of it. And then it turns into a habit pretty quickly. And so for me, the first one I did was I said, after I lie down in bed, I'm going to think of one thing, one parent win today that I had. And then after that, I'll say, I'm a great mom. And I did that every day, every night when I went to bed. And I slowly started to that resentment, those resentment feelings were starting to dissipate. And then another one that I added in more recently, because I don't know if any of you parents out there, when your kid wakes up and you're still sleeping, you're like, oh no, like go back to sleep, child. And so I didn't want those feelings either. And so I said, okay, after I hear my son wake up, I'm going to do a 1-minute reset. And what that is, I made a little reel of photos of my kids with music. And so I'll just watch that on my phone for that 1 minute. And then they're just happy memories and just joyful. And so then I smile and then I go get my kiddo up from bed. And so that's the little practical ways that I changed my mindset.
I love those examples. And I know there's somebody listening who says, well, that's great. She has the luxury of working just 3 days a week. I don't have that luxury. I'm not self-employed. I have bills. I can't afford it. I need to work the corporate grind or whatever the grind is, corporate or not. So what kind of practical advice would you have for that person?
I've been there too. So that was pretty much my whole life as a student athlete and then starting out at the university. So in terms of that, even if you're busy, even if you feel like you have no time, there are some things that you have to do. And one of those things is eat. So I would find that I would go hours at a time working and I would feel my stomach growl and kind of just like brush it off. It's like, I'll eat when I'm done. And I guess I would encourage you and those listeners, no, take that moment. It's a moment in time, right? So you have 2 minutes. Just get up, go grab an apple, whatever your snack is. I would encourage you not to have your snack at the desk. Like force yourself to get up out of the chair to go get it and then come back and enjoy it. And try not to work or look at emails or anything during that time. So finish your apple and do what you like to do, something you find energizing. So for some people, they're social butterflies and being around other people is energizing. That's me. Other people, it's having some just me time and just being like reading a passage out of a book or going outside for some fresh air for a second. You don't need all the time in the world to just have that reset. And like I said, in that tiny habit where I reset for 1 minute before I pick up my son, it's 1 minute. I think everybody's got a minute. The other thing you could try doing is track your time. So I use an app to track my time and it's really fast. I just click a button when I start something, click it again when I stop, and go through my day that way. And you might realize that you had more time than you thought. One thing that I noticed is I spend a little too much time scrolling on social media. So if you think about it, that's time you could have back to do something you find more energizing.
Well, I love that. Anybody who's listened to this podcast or listened to me in any venue knows that food is foundational. You need to eat. So I 100% support that. Absolutely. And get up and move, right? That's the other thing is, again, nobody was designed to just sit and work. Taking those small breaks, these are things that Sasha and I talk about all the time. Be properly hydrated, right? Your human needs to be watered. So you better drink water. And then you're going to have to get up because your human also needs to alleviate your bladder. So it is these little things that we feel like, oh, I'm so busy, I don't have time. And yet when you don't take care of yourself on a basic fundamental level, this isn't, go take a vacation or get a massage or get your hair done. These are fundamentals that a human specimen requires. Like these should not be options to not do it. And so anybody listening, I know you hear me say this all the time, but I think this is a great conversation from somebody who is very young and who has lived it and figured it out and who is scientific and has done the experiment and has seen the result of a better outcome when you put these little things in place. So I think the tiny habits method is amazing. Yeah, I think a lot of times we get ourselves in this, I don't have time, because we're so in the all or nothing mindset, right? I don't have time to do it all, so I do nothing. Or I don't have time to do as much as I think I need to do, so I do nothing. And I've been trying to bust people out of the all or nothing mindset for probably close to 25 years, including myself. And I'm very happy to say that I succeeded with myself, but it's a really hard mindset to get out of.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, most of us drive a car, right? And so I love the analogy of you're driving in your car. Are you going to wait until your gas tank is completely empty and your car is stopped in the middle of the road? Or are you going to heed that warning that we're on E, go fill up? Now, most of us, when we go to the gas pump and start filling our tank, instead of putting, $5 in, we fill the tank. So it's one of those things, just start, just do one tiny thing, and that might end up into something bigger, right? So for me, it's that 1 minute reset that I do in the morning, and it's turned into, I go on a half-hour walk with my kids and the dogs every day. And so just take that first step. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. So do that 1 minute reset, and anything beyond that is just bonus. And you should celebrate that fact that you took that time to invest in yourself.
Yeah, I absolutely love that approach. One of my corporate trainings is called Change One Habit. And the thing is when you change one thing, there's a ripple effect. It naturally changes a whole bunch of other things. So we very often get kind of overwhelmed by all the things that we think we need to do. And again, I can't do them all, so I do nothing. Or to your point about celebrating, we do these things that are really good for us, but we kind of dismiss and diminish it like, oh yeah, but I should be doing more. There's always the comma but. I talk about the comma but very regularly in my corporate trainings or when I do one-on-one coaching, because I'll hear somebody say, I went for a 30-minute walk, comma but I should have fill in the blank or whatever it is. There's always the comma but. We need to stop doing that, because when you can acknowledge something good that you've done and you follow it up with some version of, but it wasn't enough, you've completely taken away all the benefit of acknowledging the good thing that you've done. So let's just celebrate those victories, because they are victories, because you didn't have to do it. You could have not taken that walk, or, not had the reset of your mindset and your attitude, but you chose to do it. So we should focus and celebrate that. And that one tiny habit will ripple into other ones. It will change your energy. Your energy will change your output.
Absolutely.
The other thing I want to touch on, because you said it a couple of times, was alignment, right? That your professional goals and your personal goals were out of alignment. Let's talk about alignment, because this is something that I talk about very frequently as well, about being in alignment with your goals, your values, your priorities, your core guiding principles. And you can run out of alignment for a little bit of time and be okay, but you can't run out of alignment for an extended period of time and be okay. So in your context, what does alignment mean? And maybe let's even fast forward to now being a career coach, and how you maybe coach people to try to follow a profession or pursue that passion based on what really aligns with them.
Yeah, such a great question. And when I think about my own alignment and when I was off, you can feel it. You can feel it deep in your soul that like something's off. And sometimes we try to rationalize it by, I'm not getting paid enough, or all these external factors that you can't really control. When in truth, it's something from inside that's leading to the misalignment. So just as an example, when I was searching for my first job, I guess I have always been a pretty reflective person. So I had a pretty good idea of one of the core values that I live by. And it's that I really value innovation, which means I want to be with an employer that supports, growth and resilience over immediate success. And so I was really looking for a good fit there. And in the academic world, sometimes it can be a lot of pressure to publish and to get grants and get that immediate success so that you can get tenure. Well, I was very fortunate in that I found a place that aligned perfectly with that value and allowed me to try out and try and fail, might I add, different teaching techniques and, trying to approach students. They even let me create this hybrid course where I was synchronous in person with lab and lecture intertwined together instead of a distinct lab and a separate lecture. And so just that flexibility to experiment and try new things, I was living in perfect alignment. And so it felt right. But I was intentional before I accepted the position in that case. And then I run into this a lot with my clients. And that's why the first 3 sessions I do with every single client, regardless of their needs, is these foundational sessions where we dive really deep into clarifying their core values and distinguishing those skills and those sincere interests that they have, because it's all three of those things together, intertwined, that can lead to alignment, fulfillment, or the lack thereof. And so usually when I ask, okay, what are your values? What do you live by? If I ask something that open-ended and simple, it is really hard. Like, how would you summarize your values? And so I did this with myself, and I do this with my clients, is we go through a few exercises and some reflective questions, and in the end are able to write 2 to 4 core value statements that are very unique to you. And mine actually are pasted beside my mirror in the bathroom. So every morning I wake up, I read my value statements and I live my life by them. And if I'm feeling off, I go back to my value statements and say, how well have I been living this? And usually the answer is, I haven't been living that one so good. Like I have one associated with being energized by other people and diverse perspectives. And so if I'm feeling a little off, being a mom and running a business from your own home, that's usually the value I'm off on. So it just reminds me I need to go out and build relationships and bounce ideas off other people. And so that's one thing that I did when I launched my own business. Before I even launched, I started to build a community of fellow coaches that I could bounce ideas off of, I could learn from, because I had so much of that in academia. I could just walk down the hall and bounce ideas off of my colleague. And I didn't have that as an entrepreneur. And so when you start your own business, it can be a lonely venture unless you're very proactive about building that community for yourself. And so that was just one of my values and an example. But my clients certainly, it helps them filter out job opportunities and career directions and what paths to take if they're living true to their values.
Yeah. And I think it's fair to also say that you might not get to be in 100% alignment with what you choose to do, right? Because that's the unicorn I think we're all chasing. But that's also probably not reality for most people in any facet of their life. When I think of, goals, values, core guiding principles, I think that pertains to every relationship as well. If I'm going to enter a relationship with somebody, whether it's personal, it's business, it's an intimate relationship, whatever it is, we have to be pretty aligned in a lot of things. But it's also okay if we're not aligned in some things, because to think you're going to be 100% in alignment, I would say number one is probably not realistic. And number two, I don't really think that's healthy. I think it is healthy to have a little bit of misalignment, because that reminds you to stay grounded, to stay rooted. Maybe it will open you up to new things that you didn't know or realize, or at least give you a sense of perspective and appreciation, diversity, like you said. So if we're only going to be seeking things that support everything and in every way that we want it, I think we're going to be struggling a lot. We're going to feel stressed and undervalued and unfulfilled. So even in that regard, I think there's a bit of a mindset shift, or at least, a check-in with the mindset about, as you're pursuing anything, career, relationships, even your own personal goals. If you have a goal, I always ask people, well, why? Why is that important to you? Why do you want to run a marathon? Why? Oh, because everybody else is, and I feel like I should. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's a good enough reason to actually do what it takes to run a marathon, right? So even some of these other goals, when it comes to your own personal health goals, you should have a pretty good reason why you want to do that. And it should be aligned with what's important to you. Is that kind of the same when it comes to career path?
Yeah. And the other thing is, you can't rely on any one person or one thing to fulfill you, right? So if you expect your career to bring you life fulfillment, that's probably not a healthy place to be. Your career is part of it, but it's not all of it, and it can't provide everything. On the podcast that I host, the one question I ask is, what is one aspect of your job that's less appealing? I've never had one person say, nope, everything's great, right? There's always something. It's not always like fulfilling in that sense. And then on the relationship side, just echoing what you said, actually in that space, some alignment is great. So thinking about in marriage and in intimate relationships, it's a whole lot easier if some of your values, around money, how you show and receive love, some of those things sure do make life a lot easier. But there are other things that I really appreciate a diverse perspective. I am an extreme extrovert. My husband is the most introverted person I think I've ever met. But together it's so wonderful because we expose each other to those things. And I work with a lot of clients that are introverted. And if it weren't for my husband and some of my dear friends that are introverted, I think it would be, a lot harder for me to talk through. Go out and do an informational interview, reach out to some people on LinkedIn and have chats with them. That comes so easy to me, right? But that is such a huge barrier for others, especially those that are introverted. And so helping them navigate that, because you can still do certain things depending on your personality. So it's about knowing who you are and being brave and bold to show that unique quality about yourself with others, because I think I hope the world is changing and starting to really appreciate that diversity.
Well, I hope and I think so as well. And as I knew it would be, this has been a delightful conversation. I do want to wrap it up just again to focus this on stress and burnout, right? Because when you're out of alignment, eventually your human is going to suffer. Anytime we have, thoughts, emotions in our heads that really are not productive, that leads to some physical expression of it. And then we don't sleep and we don't have energy, and we maybe turn to food or alcohol to feel a different way, or we don't feel motivated to go out and socialize. And all of that eventually leads to a decline in the quality of your life. And when you can be in alignment, at least to the best of your ability, I think even just starting to understand what that is. So many people, when I teach classes like this, they don't even know what their core guiding principles are, because they've never had to sit down and articulate them. Or to your point, when you say, what are your values? People are like, what's a value? How do you define that? So I encourage anybody who's listening to this to get those words on paper and really start to dig deep. And then you determine, am I spending my resources, my time, my money, and my energy in ways that align with what my human wants to do? And sometimes we are, and sometimes we're not. And if we're not, maybe we're not, and it's a brief period of time, and I'm doing it for a reason, and I'm okay with it, and that's okay. Maybe we're not, and it's, oh yeah, that is what's causing me to be unfulfilled or unmotivated or have no energy. And perhaps I want to start to shift and come into a little more alignment. So, I think it's career, it's professional, it's friends, it's family members, it's everything. It's all foundational, because at the core, humans are all the same. They just are, right? There are differences, but we are all human beings, and all human beings are basically the same. The needs of humans are roughly the same. And how we go about identifying those needs, identifying maybe the gaps in our own lives where those needs are not being met. And then what do we as individuals, because to Cassie's point, you can't rely on someone or something else to fulfill you. You are in charge of you and you only. I say that all the time, right? And so at some point, I am going to need to do something to shift if I'm determining that what's going on is not working. And I don't want to get to the point where I'm burned out, because burnout is a whole other animal that you do not even want to get to know. And if we can avoid it, that's the best case scenario. And, when you listen to all the things that Cassie said and some of the things that you've heard over and over and over again on this podcast, hopefully we're starting to really kind of put those puzzle pieces together for everyone to truly live their healthiest, happiest, most fulfilled life that they possibly can while they are here on this planet. So Cassie, before we officially sign off, tell everybody about your podcast, and we'll put all the information in the show notes of how to get in touch with you, but your podcast and anything else that we have not covered that you think people should know.
Sure, happy to. So just two quick things. One is, just like Michelle is saying, you got to create space to have that time to reflect and recognize. Because when you're on the road to burnout, you are stressed and working your tail off and not leaving space to actually think about how you're feeling. And then second, you're not alone. Oh my goodness, so many people are going through the same stress cycle that you are. But just like you wouldn't try to learn how to play basketball without a coach, you don't have to navigate this alone, right? So if you're struggling with stress and mental health and all sorts of things, think about the resources that are out there. In some cases, it's therapy. In other cases, it's hiring a health coach. And if it's associated with your career, maybe it's a career coach. So my podcast, Diverse Roots, which is all about career journeys in science and medicine, my guests share a lot about that experience in terms of their careers. And so I encourage you all to tune in and feel free to reach out to me as well. You can reach out to me on Instagram, Cassie_SSCC. You can also find me through my website at successinsciencecc.com.
I love it. Thank you so much. This was a really great conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed getting to hear it from the perspective of somebody who's much younger than me and who has gone through that transition and figured it out very early on. I'm hoping anybody who's listening, no matter what your age is, sometimes I get, Michelle, you have such young people on your podcast. Can't you get somebody who's in your age group? Honestly, there's not a lot of us in my age group that do this. And just because somebody's young doesn't mean they don't have the skills and talents and the wisdom that you can learn from. So I hope that wherever you are in life, your age, your professional career, whatever, that you really digest a lot of what Cassie said, because it absolutely pertains to so many aspects of things that we go through. And with all of that, I think I'm going to be quiet and let all of you go and do what you need to do, which is be a better being.
Thank you for listening to the Be a Better Being podcast. Michelle and Sasha hope that what you heard today inspires you to embrace this journey of life with an open mind, a kind heart, and a willingness to learn and evolve. If you enjoyed the content, please help spread their message by subscribing, sharing, and leaving a 5-star review. If you have a show topic idea or would like to be a guest, please visit betterbeings.net and fill out a contact form. Until next time, go and be a better being.